and welcome to the interview. At 26, she pioneered new ways of researching animals, including by living with them. Now, at 85, as a UN messenger of peace, she travels over 300 days a year to share the urgency to take action on behalf of all living things and the planet we all share. And we are fortunate enough to have her with us today here in Paris at the Carrousel du Louvre. Great to have you here on the show, Dr. Jane Goodall.
Good to be here, thank you.
So you literally broke the rules at the very beginning of your career for the sake of animal conservation. Do you think that we need to think a little bit more out of the box when it comes to the fight against climate change?
Well, my entry into the world of the climate crisis started after I'd spent many, many years learning about the chimpanzees in the rainforest. And then when I was traveling around talking about the fact that chimpanzees across Africa are vanishing, forests are being cut down, there's the hunting of mothers to steal babies for medical research and entertainment. And so I was beginning to travel around the world, and I encountered the problems that we're facing in relation to the warming of the globe. So I stood in Greenland with Inuit elders, and this was the end of winter. And they were telling me when we were children, even in summer the ice here never melted. And now the icebergs were breaking off and the water was pouring out. And of course the sea level rising. And the ice cap on top of the world is sinking. And I've met people who can no longer live in their island homes because of the rise in the ocean, so that at high tide they're not habitable anymore. And everywhere I go, all around the world, people say, well, the weather patterns have changed. You know, it's wet when it should be dry. We've never had a drought this long. The hurricanes are more often and worse. And so the effects of the warming globe have led to these dramatic changes in weather patterns everywhere, literally everywhere. And it's very hard for some people to understand what they can do. And actually it takes a whole lot of people working together to make proper change. So, we can all try and burn less fossil fuel. We can all plant trees, do what we can to protect forests, try and do something about the pollution of the ocean, and generally think about the consequences of the little things we buy and choose to do each day. Where did they come from? Did it harm the environment? Did it lead to cruelty to animals? And all of this ties together. So we're harming the planet in so many ways. And the result of that is these very frightening changes in climate.
So actually, to heal the harm we've inflicted on planet Earth so far, you say we have to overcome three major issues: poverty, consumerism, and human demographics.
That's exactly right, because it's absolutely, when you're very poor, you're going to cut down the last trees, knowing it's going to lead to soil erosion, desertification, because you're desperate to grow more food, and the land that you have is already over-farmed and infertile. And so if you're in a city, you're going to buy the cheapest food. You can't afford to worry about where it came from or how it was made, because you must survive. And then the rest of us have unsustainable lifestyles. And it's crazy to think that we can have unlimited economic development on a planet with finite natural resources and a still growing human population. Something's got to give.
And if you take the Yellow Vest movement, for instance, in France, we've seen over the past few seasons a great social divide between those who are fighting to actually make it to the end of the month versus the other who are struggling and fighting against the end of the world. How can we better engage with middle classes to actually have them join the fight?
Well, that's why I began the Jane Goodall Institute program for young people, Roots and Shoots, back in 1991. And it began with 12 high school students in Tanzania who are worried about the poaching in the parks, the destruction of the coral reefs. They were worried about the homeless children. They were worried about stray dogs. They were worried about everything. And so we decided to form this, it's a movement really, with the main message, every single individual matters and makes some impact on the planet every single day. and we get to choose what sort of impact we make. And we decided from the beginning, each group would choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And of course, very often, one project can accomplish all those goals. And then as the years went by, the program began to grow. So it's now in about 60 countries. We have members kindergarten, university, everything in between. And it's not that young people can change the world, they are changing the world. And they're influencing their parents and their grandparents, some of whom may be CEOs of major companies or somewhere high up in the political sphere. So young people are beginning to understand the urgency because it's been talked about all around them. When I was young, there wasn't an emergency.
So you actually also say that we need a more holistic approach when it comes to actually better understanding what climate change means. And we need the help of the government, of the citizen, of NGOs, of everyone, literally everyone.
Everyone. That's what we need, everyone. And, one of the other benefits of the Roots and Shoots program is that we try and bring young people together from different countries, cultures, and religions so that they understand that underneath these obvious differences, we're all the same underneath. And, because we've got to do something about the hatred that's overcoming the world. We've got to do something about the swing to the far right. We've got to change the gap between the haves and the have-nots and make something that's fairer and take this huge amount of wealth from the hands of a few people.
Now, millennials and the younger generation seem to be way more aware of those climate issues than their parents. If you take Greta Thunberg, for instance, do you recognize a little bit of yourself in her?
Well, I see it all over the world, all of our young people. And the reason that they're, more aware is that the problems have got so much worse. So when I was, a young girl, nobody was talking about those problems because they didn't yet exist. We were worried about war and the aftermath of war. And, of course, we're still worrying about that with the refugees and the immigrants, some of whom are fleeing violence, but some are fleeing the results of the warming globe.
And you once said that when you were a little girl, you would dream like a man because at the time you would do things that women weren't allowed to do. Do you dream more as a woman now?
Well, I dream as myself mostly, but I certainly did dream I was a man. I did all kinds of adventures, but...
And you know that every single fight needs role models to actually be able to bring more awareness on the general public. If I do tell you that you're a role model for so many, would you embody that part? Would you actually say, yes, I can be a role model?
Well, I've turned out to be a role model, whether I wanted to or not, because everybody says you are my role model. I'm doing what I do because of you. They come to my lecture and say, well, you changed my life tonight. I'm going to do my bit. That's why I'm still traveling this crazy amount of time.
Where this travel are going to take you next? What part of the globe really needs more your implication on the matters of climate change?
Well, everywhere needs it, really. I mean, the rich need it so that they understand better. The poor need it so that we can help them live better lives. So I'm needed everywhere. And it's hard to choose which of the many invitations I have that I can accept. So next I go to New York.
And as a fellow UN messenger of peace, there is also Leonardo DiCaprio, who seems to be like your best friend. Do we need also those types of prominent figures to actually help us to know more and, again, bring the awareness more and more to everyone on the planet?
Yeah, that's right. Leo and other people who are in the public eye like that, if they are taking the lead, then indeed people will become more aware more quickly.
Jane Goodall, fighter against the climate change. Thank you so much for stopping by the interview here on France 24.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we have time for, but please stay with us. More news to come on France 24.